thing about these waves of possibilities is if we look at all the future as a wave of possibilities and all of our past as a wave of possibilities, nothing is actually really real except the now. But when you cast your awareness into these different realities, it's like the thing we do when we worry about something happening in the future. We can really create these solid events, things that might happen just by thinking about it. But with the past, it's really interesting because let's say you nearly drowned, and then say you nearly drowned when you're 5, and then you can have consecutive fear situations with water all the way up to now. Say for 30 years you have compounding, repeating cycles of similarity happening through time that you've created. When you clear the original event and make it really positive, let's say you have a positive experience in the water, your whole timeline can shift to a cycle of beautiful memories and beautiful experiences with water. And when you change the past, you change the present for the future. And this is something I've seen a lot. I started doing these sorts of healing modalities 10 years ago, and I started seeing things straight away that I didn't understand. And I've endeavoured to do a lot of research, which has led me to further and further kind of getting to a point where I can start to grasp these concepts. Myself, and I've seen a lot of other people through various different methods, and the methods I use, let go of something in the sense that it becomes really quite complete and quite obvious. Let's say a traumatic kind of abuse event, like a physical abuse event, where someone goes and reviews the emotions, and they release the emotions, and they review the event, and they release the event, and then they recreate the event with something positive. And just you watch them when they do it. They're in the trauma and they're like, whoa, this is intense, and they let it go, and they just go, oh. And then they revisualize something beautiful. You kind of guide them through it, and you revisualize something beautiful to replace that juncture on their timeline. All these things we call them junctures. They replace it, and they just go, oh, that's great. And then they come out of the treatment and they're like, oh, awesome. And let's say they came for the treatment and they were like sweating and agitated and fidgety, and they obviously had some problems. And they just transformed. Now, I've experienced that, and I've seen that countless times. And I was like, well, what's going on? What's going on here? When someone lets something go and they replace it, something's really, really happening. And that's just on that sort of level, and this can lead to all sorts of different healings in the body. So, yeah, it's an amazing, amazing thing. So it seems that through this sort of information, especially more scientific-minded people can realize that a lot of people are so resistant to healing. They're so attached to their pain story because it gives them attention in their social kind of setup. And I guess we're going to get onto a thing called harmonic resonance soon, where we'll talk about that. So when we live in the past negative events and keep reviewing them, we don't move on or heal. Completing our review of the past is fundamental for human healing. That's letting it go and stop talking about it. Like, who are you without your pain story? You know, and this is when we get into a really cool thing. Once you let all that go and you interact with people from a place of just awareness, not wariness, so much of the time we're interacting with people with a complete foundation of negative experiences, which make us very wary of new people. The only reason we're wary of new people when we meet them is because we are, from our past experiences. So we're trying to reduce the chance of a negative experience happening again. It's pretty amazing. And again, it's like, essentially it's looking at the roadblocks that we have in ourselves that make us want to not let go. Yeah. So this whole idea that consciousness came first is supported by this biocentric theory, but it's also supported by a mystic called Rudolf Steiner, who downloaded basically a whole lot of incredible information from somewhere and started sharing it. And one of the things he said is that consciousness came to the planet first and set the planet up in such a way that we could actually eventually have a body. Right? And this is very interesting in the sense that we look at the way biocentrism shows that the universe is completely tuned for us to be here, and then you look at what he's saying about the fact that consciousness came and tuned everything and then went into bodies. Another person who backs this up is Dr. Michael Newton. He's based out of Sacramento, California, and he does an amazing process of deep hypnosis into lives in between lives, where he would interview a whole lot of different people systematically to experience what happened for them in between lives. And one of the interesting things they found was that people would go to a soul guide and a soul group, and they would do a whole bunch of almost research and study and teamwork to work out how they want to do their next reincarnation, what they want to experience for their own learning process. Now, one of the things they do in between lives is they learn how to, this is basically what people told him, and it happened over and over again, and he started to create a theory. And while he was creating these theories, he blocked himself out to all other information and just listened to what his clients were telling him. And a lot of them talked about this process of working with the soul guide to learn how to make molecules, learn how to make atoms, learn how to make microorganisms, learn how to make bacteria, all this sort of thing. As you reach higher levels of consciousness, you learn how to make more and more complex organisms. So in between lives, this conscious entity, us, is learning how to make other life as well. This gets really interesting when you look at biocentrism, Steiner and Michael Newton's work, all around the idea of consciousness creating reality. I'm going to pass on one more experiment here with retrocausality, and this is the way we send information back to ourselves. Stay with me here because this one's complicated. If you get 10 maths tests that are equal difficulty, right? And you sit down and you do them. They all get difficulty, and then if I randomly choose, after you've completed the maths tests, if I randomly choose half of them, 5 of those tests, and I give them back to you, and you're going to study all the correct answers, random in half of them. The one that you study in the future, the 5 that you study, will always be the same 5 that you scored highest on. Does that make sense? Because your knowledge of studying the answers in the future is going to send them, that knowledge is going to go back to you back in time and give you a better result on those 5 maths tests in the past. So our knowledge of something in the future supports our learning in the past. That's an experiment that's been repeated a lot, and that's a real trip for a lot of people. The older you get, the harder that is to understand, I've found. So how does that work? So if I can send information to myself back in time, we can do all sorts of interesting things. Let's say I want to be a better guitar player. I can start to imagine myself learning guitar from a younger and younger and younger age. Just imagining myself in the past. It's creating these timelines where I'm developing the musical faculties which are going to support me in the present. There's all these different other practices you can do with different spiritual practices or healing practices of giving love to your inner child, giving love and to support to this younger version of yourself. And these experiments show that this is really a real thing. You can really actually heal yourself in the past. And if you were quite alone when you were a kid, you can give a lot of love and support to yourself, and that's actually going to help this healing process through time come to you in the present. So a lot of these sorts of healings that happen don't really maybe have the scientific backing to understand what's going on. We don't actually need all the science. A lot of people can just feel this sort of thing. So a lot of what we're saying here is masculine. Okay? We're understanding stuff. This is a very masculine approach to looking at healing. Whereas the feminine approach to looking at all this is going, yeah, stuff all that, I feel that, don't worry about it, cool, put the whiteboard away, no worries, I feel that. And that's really cool. So feminine oriented people, or women, have an amazing advantage with a lot of this because you can often have a better connection with your heart and you can just feel a lot of these concepts and go, oh yeah, cool, yeah, sweet. I don't need all the science, but yeah, thanks.